Why is there the disparity in Pac-12 football coaches as opposed to Pac-12 basketball coaches? Let's get started here and break that down on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Happy Tuesday to everybody out there. All right, now, I was talking with a guy at a bar the other day, and he made a great point to me. And he said, have you ever noticed that all the Pac-12 football coaches are good, or at least there is some semblance of hope, where all the Pac-12 basketball coaches, well, not all of them, there's some very good ones, but a lot of them generally stink. Or not a lot of them, but some of them generally stink. And it got me thinking, why is that, and is this true? So the first thing we're going to do is let's talk about it. All right. Now, the first thing is with Pac-12 football coaches, we'll just start out in the old Pac-12 South. Again, I know there's no Pac-12 South anymore. Totally get all that. Save your emails. But let's just look at it, though. Let's start in the state of Arizona. Jedd Fisch. You're not going to find many Arizona fans that are unhappy with the job that Jedd Fisch has done at the University of Arizona, and rightfully so, because quite frankly, Jedd Fisch has been awesome here. And for a variety of reasons, like we've talked about a billion times. He came in, he's been able to recruit, he's been able to put a good product on the field. You go from he inherited a 12-game losing streak to that first year you get 1 win, the second year you get 5. Now I think you're squarely in contention for a bowl opportunity. Jedd Fisch has done a very, very good job here at the University of Arizona. There's obviously a lot of reason to like Jedd Fisch and what he's been able to do. Then you look at Kenny Dillingham. I have no clue if Dilly can coach or not, but so far, just like Jedd Fisch did, Dilly has done all the right things. And by doing all the right things, I mean that he has come in and he has put together a great staff of recruiters, a bunch of guys who also have shown that they embrace the grind. And Dilly wants to be at Arizona or at the Arizona State University. So, again, who knows if he is going to be good or not, but the one thing we know about Dilly is that there is no lost cause. Dilly is no lost cause yet. Hopefully, maybe he will be, but we don't know that. All right, now, then you go to the mountain schools. You got Kyle Whittingham. Kyle Whittingham is probably the best coach in the conference. If it's not Lincoln Riley, it's probably Kyle Whittingham. He has a top 15 program year in and year out at Utah, and it's an assembly line. They don't bring in these top 25 recruiting classes, like generally, speaking. They don't bring in guys like that, but he gets his top 40 type players and he coaches them up. And who is anybody else to really complain about anything that he's done, because he's done a fantastic job right there. It's hard to really look at the job that Kyle Whittingham has done and give him anything but an A+. And if Kyle Whittingham ever wanted to go to another school, he could probably choose his school. That's how good he is. He runs a system that works. He has a product that people like, especially in Utah, that people show up for. And again, he's just done a very nice job there at Utah. There's no way to say that he hasn't been an A+ hire for them. Then Colorado. Deion Sanders. Who knows? Maybe Deion can't coach. I don't know. I'm guessing that Deion's probably going to end up being a pretty good hire, but there's certainly no indication that he can't coach and that he is a lost cause. There is absolutely none of that right there, and that's a big thing for. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people. He's brought in the number 1 transfer portal class in the country. Again, when you got guys like his son, Travis Hunter, some of the other players he's brought in, Deion has hit the ground running at Colorado. Now, again, I think it's probably going to take him a year or two, but I think it's hard to look at Deion and not be very impressed by what he has been able to do so far. And again, he might not be able to coach, but he certainly isn't a lost cause by any means. Then you look at the LA schools. Now, granted, last year in the conference, but Chip Kelly for a while looked like he could be on the hot seat. Chip Kelly has rectified a lot of those issues here. Chip Kelly is now I think it's safe to say, is on steady footing. He brought in arguably the top-rated quarterback in the entire country. And he's probably not going to be able to do what he did at Oregon, but I think it's very, very easy to project Chip Kelly as being a 9-win coach at UCLA, something like that. I think that, obviously Chip, I think, has done a pretty good job there. Then you look at Clay Helton. I said that earlier too. Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley obviously is a really good coach. He wins 99.6% of his games. That's how good he is. Again, these are all coaches that either at the Pac-12 South, these are all coaches that either have a lot of potential, or coaches that I think are still on the up and up, but you have a nice little balance of proven commodities and potential. Now, let's get to the Pac-12 North. And again, I realize that these aren't the terms that people are using anymore. I don't care. With the Pac-12 North, you got first of all, you got Oregon. Dan Lanning was a great hire. Dan Lanning, I think it's very easy to see, is a better coach than Mario Cristobal. Probably equal recruiters, but Dan Lanning is a better coach than Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal was not a good coach. Dan Lanning is, if you're an Oregon fan, I think you're pretty excited that Dan Lanning is your head coach. He's done a nice job right there. Then at Washington, you got Kalen DeBoer. He had one of the most high flying offenses on the West Coast last year, won a lot of games. You return in pretty much everybody. You got arguably the best receiving core in the entire conference, maybe the country. And again, with Michael Penix Jr., you got a quarterback that can deliver them the ball. Again, he's not like he's Caleb Williams, but he's more than good enough. He's a good player. And then on top of that, he's just done a really good job. If you're Washington, I think you're ecstatic. Both, I think Oregon and Washington are both thrilled that they have those two coaches right there. And I don't think I'm breaking any news right there with that one. Then after that, you also have, now let's get to the Bay Area schools. Now it's a little bit more interesting. Obviously, David Shaw needed to go at that point. I always felt David Shaw was a little bit overrated. I mean, I know that he won a lot of games, but I always felt that style of play where you're basically looking for a reason to punt on 4th and 1, you're always punting, or you're on the other team's 41 and you're punting it into the end zone. That stuff to me is weak. But again, he had a nice little run there, but it was definitely time. You're bringing in Troy Taylor. No clue if he can coach or not, but that goes with it, though. That you don't know. We'll find out. We'll certainly find out soon enough with him, but who knows? Maybe he can coach. We'll find out. Then you also, the other spot right there, you've also got, Justin Wilcox. Now, Justin Wilcox is I like Justin Wilcox. I think for California, he's good. Keep in mind, Cal doesn't care a ton about sports. So there's always going to be a little bit of an issue there. But, with Cal, and again, we're going to get back to we'll get back to Oregon State and Washington State here in a second. But with Cal, if you can win 6 or 7 or 8 games, you're a solid coach right there. We're going to continue to talk about that. But first, FanDuel. All right, now, this is the bummer time of the sports season for me because there's no football, there's no basketball. But you know what makes games more interesting? FanDuel. FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege. Check it out. You can get all the best. Deals right there, and it makes things interesting. How many times have you watched a game and you're like, man, I got better things to do? But you know what? You don't have better things to do is watch the game if you've got a little bit of scratch on it. And that's what makes it more interesting right there. FanDuel.com, it's /LockedOnCollege. It's huge. Obviously, everybody's using it. Check it out, FanDuel.com. You will not be disappointed. All right, we're going to talk about some of the rest of these schools, and then we're going to get into basketball and talk about why is this. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, we just talked about the Bay Area schools. Now, Oregon State, perfect example. Jonathan Smith. I love Jonathan Smith. Now, obviously, he's an alum. Show you how old I am. I remember Jonathan Smith on the best Oregon State team in school history, I believe. I want to say 99, Dennis Erickson, head coach. But he's done a really good job, though. Oregon State now is in the top 25, and you got to give him the lion's share of that credit. Well, you got to give him all the credit right there, because Oregon State's not an easy place to win at, but he's been able to win right there. And that's certainly a tip of the cap to him, because again, that's not an easy place. They're going to be good again this season. He's recruiting well. You got DJ Uiagalelei coming in. I think everybody's kind of curious to see how he fits in, but there's a lot to like right there with Jonathan Smith, and I think it's impossible to give him anything else but an A higher. Again, just a leader of men. How about that? We're going to tag Jonathan Smith with the leader of men category right there, because quite frankly, he deserves that. And then obviously Washington State. Washington State's always a school that I think should be able to win 7 games. It's got a better track record than you would think, and on top of that, you've got some pretty good coaches in there as well that have been able to make the plays. In the past, I think you had a run where you had 3 Rose Bowls in 10 years with 3 different coaches, something like that, or maybe it was 2. Washington State, though, you got Cam Ward. Cam Ward's a fine quarterback. You're not going to find me bashing Cam Ward by any means. I think he's a good quarterback. They should be able to win 6-7 games. They're on solid footing. So all of these schools are on solid footing right now. Now, why in the world now let's get to basketball right here, and we'll talk about that. First of all, we'll start the same place we started with Arizona. Tommy Lloyd, the Tommy gun. Tommy Lloyd is a really good coach. I'm not breaking any news to anybody out there. He's the winningest coach in college basketball history through 2 years. That's how good he is. And he does it with a fun style play. Now, granted, he's got to take it to the next level come tournament time, but so far so good with Tommy Lloyd. Bobby Hurley, I've always said this. I'm fine with Bobby Hurley if he's my. I'm fine with Bobby Hurley if he's my coach at ASU. You're always going to kind of be on that tournament periphery. It's not an easy place to win because they don't care about academics. Michael Crow does not care about things like that. So but again, solid. And then you go up to the mountain schools. Craig Smith, Tad Boyle. Okay, neither one stinks. I would be interested in why, I think Utah should be a little bit better than they are. I thought Larry Kristoviak kind of blew an opportunity right there. Then you've also got other coach like Tad Boyle. Now I know that a lot of Arizona fans hate Tad Boyle. I get it, but Tad Boyle's okay. But again, what we're looking at right here, though, with these coaches is, while outside of Tommy Lloyd, none of them stink. None of them really excite you. And that's a little bit of a problem, I think. Then you get to UCLA, USC. I like Andy Enfield. I think Andy Enfield's done a very nice job there at SC. He gets beat up a lot, but he's also not a great tactician. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a great X's and O's coach, because he's not a great X's and O's coach, which is always going to kind of limit them to a certain degree. Then Mick Cronin. It's hard to argue with the job Mick's done, but we're also going to find out now what Mick can do, because Mick inherited Jaime Jaquez. He inherited Tiger Campbell. Much of that roster was still not his. Now, he's going to have his own roster here for the first time, just like Tommy Lloyd. How's it going to play out? You got a lot of international players coming in. You got Dylan Andrews, who I like, but there's still an open book on him. We're going to find out about Cronin. So far, so good with Cronin, but you do wonder if he's got a little bit of that Ben Howland in him, though, where I don't know. Are you going to wear out your welcome right there? I think that's something that concerns something that should rightfully concern some people. Are you going to wear out that welcome? I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. But it's certainly something that you got to keep an eye on. But so far, like I said, but Cronin, Andy Enfield, good hires. Now, when you get to the North, it becomes, the old Pac-12 North, it becomes a little bit more questionable. All right, so let's talk about first. Let's go Oregon State. Wayne Tinkle made an Elite Eight. Give him credit for that, but Wayne Tinkle's not a good coach. Oregon State, again, not an easy place to win. I totally get all that, but Oregon State should be able to be better than they are. And that is, you're kind of settling for mediocrity with Wayne Tinkle. You know what Wayne Tinkle can do, and you might make the tournament once out every 4 years, but generally when you made the tournament, it's because he's hired the father of twins that are very good, or he brought in his own kid. Without those players, Oregon State's not been very good. And not only that, I don't expect Oregon State to continue to be very good. That's not a good hire right there. Oregon State should be able to do better, in my opinion. So there's one, Wayne Tinkle. Then next door, Mike Hopkins. Mike Hopkins stinks as well. I know Mike Hopkins won 2 Conference Coach of the Year awards. I don't care. Washington, we've seen it. You should be able to put a wall around Seattle. If you put a wall around Seattle, or maybe even expand that out to the Pacific Northwest, the Dog Pound becomes a fun place to play at. We've seen what it can be like when it's rocking. Mike Hopkins is not the dude to get that going, nor will Mike Hopkins, I believe, ever be the dude to get that one going. Just not dynamic enough. Just you run that zone. You're not really recruiting well. There's nothing about Mike Hopkins that screams out that, man, this guy's really, really good. We got to be able to keep this dude around. There is absolutely none of that right now with Mike Hopkins. And again, I'm not really breaking any news. So both those coaches, not good. Then let's go down to Stanford. All right. Stanford is the epitome of what I'm talking about. Stanford clearly does not care about basketball anymore. Keep in mind, when I was coming up, Stanford was a top 15 program. Mike Montgomery was a great coach. But Stanford has obviously fallen on some hard times. And a big reason why is because they keep running it back with the same mediocre coach. Jared Haas is not a good coach. You are not going to win with Jared Haas. You are not going to put together a good product. We've seen this now for 6 or 7 years. He's just not going to get it done, but you keep bringing him back, which indicates that you clearly don't care about basketball. Just kind of the way it is. Now, let's talk about Cal, and let's talk about Oregon, and let's talk about Washington State then as well. Come back with us. Thanks for keeping it locked on, Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, now time to talk about Cal. Time to talk about Cal. Now, the Mark Madsen hire, I think, is an interesting hire, and one that I think Stanford should have made, but Stanford doesn't care about basketball. I think there's some upside there, but Cal, again, is a difficult place to win. It's not a great home court environment. The facilities certainly aren't great. On top of that, you haven't been good for quite a while. Now, can Mark Madsen bring that back? Maybe. But at least you've got some hope there, because there hasn't been hope there in about 5 or 6 years. Do you sense a trend right here with some of these schools? I'm interested to see what Madsen can do. Then up at Oregon, Dana Altman. Dana Altman ran the conference for about 7-8 years, but he's fallen on hard times the past 2 years. He's got a loaded roster this year. He needs to be able to make it work. If you're an Oregon fan, I don't think there's any excuses anymore. You expect Dana Altman to be able to win, and you expect him to be able to win with this roster that he currently has. He should be able to win with this roster that he currently has. You're loaded up and down the board. You got the best big man in the conference coming back. You got a top 10 recruiting class. You got some good returners, some good transfer portal guys. But overall, if you're Oregon, Dana Altman's been definitely a good hire for you. Then at Washington State, I like Kyle Smith, but Kyle Smith, there's clearly something wrong with Kyle Smith, though, because everybody leaves after a year. Nobody likes being around Kyle Smith. And after a while, I start to wonder whose fault that really is. And I'm thinking that it's Kyle Smith's. So, you're not going to be optimistic if you're Washington State. So that's kind of where you're at. You got about 5 or 6 of the Pac-12 schools where you have coaches that have absolutely no hope of being better, have no hope of actually becoming good, and that's a problem. And that's a major problem. I mean, let's be honest here. Whereas in football, you at least have the optimism that there isn't one coach out there that you clearly know stinks. But this also is an indication, though, of a conference that does not take its sporting roles seriously and should take its sporting roles seriously. When I was growing up, Pac-12 was awesome at basketball, or the Pac-10. You had You had 2 top 10 programs. You had 3 top 15. You had schools that were regularly in the Final Four. Couple that won national titles in off years. That ain't happening anymore right now. So again, while there are some good basketball programs in the conference, it's got to be better than it is, and there's no excuse why. Now, I do give the presidents kudos for getting this into play right here and at least getting the football program situated. But again, There's no other conference in basketball where you have a Stanford where you're just going to let a guy who has been awful for 7 years continue to do what he's doing. That does not work for anybody right now, nor should it work for anybody. That is not a good look. And not only is it not a good look, it just shows you, too, that, again, a lot of people here do not care about sports. And we got to call a spade on that one. That's also why I would like to move to the Big 12, because obviously at Arizona, you care about sports. That is a big part of what you do. All right. Now, so that's where we talked about, the importance of football and why isn't basketball better? It's obviously because the presidents don't care. Now, tomorrow we're going to break down Elijah Rushing's decision. Big time prospect here out of South Point, Tucson. A lot of people, a lot of people consider him the best pass rusher in the entire country. He is going to be announcing Thursday. What are Arizona's chances? What would he mean if he came here? What has Jedd Fisch done right? What has Jedd Fisch done wrong? All kinds of stuff that we're going to talk about, though, with Elijah Rushing, because there's potential that Arizona is going to get him. So we'll break all that down tomorrow, but you have a great rest of your 4th of July. And as always, thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats.